Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this time we've got a real treat in store, or at least hopefully we've got a real treat in store as we take a look at the fighting fantasy book Secrets of Salamonis by Steve Jackson and Jonathan Green, with art by Tazio Bettin. Before we get into the meat of this one, I have the very pleasant duty of thanking a new patron, a kind soul who has gone to patreon.com/HJDoom and pledged some of their actual hard-earned money to support my nonsense. All patrons get a whole bunch of gaming stuff that I've written over the years as a reward. Eddie, thank you so much for putting your hand in your pocket. It is much appreciated. I'm currently in the early stages of designing a new game book, which might be the toughest challenge I've attempted so far. I'm trying to write something that's as close as possible to being perfectly balanced. It's early days, but I'll be putting a few updates on Patreon as the project develops. Now let's take a closer look at Secrets of Salamonis. It's hard to think of a better team-up in the fighting fantasy space than Steve Jackson and Jonathan Green. Between them, they've been responsible for some of the most inventive and mechanically interesting game books in the entire run. It's been a very long time since Steve Jackson has dabbled in gamebooks. His last entry in the series was 1989's Creature of Havoc, more than 30 years before this 2022 volume. Jonathan Green has, of course, been very busy in the gamebook space with his Ace gamebook line, but this is the first fighting fantasy project for him since 2010's Night of the Necromancer. Tazio Bettin is something of an unknown quantity in game books, but he's an experienced illustrator who has worked with Games Workshop and is currently the artist on Azimuth in 2000 AD, which is a great series written by Dan Abnett, and his style on that strip showcases really strong anatomy fundamentals as well as a talent for the weird. He feels like a great fit for fighting fantasy, and a quick glance through the artwork suggests that this is the best art we've seen for some considerable time, which is very exciting to me. Let's take a look at the rules. We've had a few books recently that stuck very close to the classic fighting fantasy system, so it's a pleasant change to report that Jackson and Green have iterated a little on the core rules. While skill, stamina and luck are all present and correct, you don't roll for them randomly. You start with a skill and luck of 6 and a stamina of 12. This is probably the single best change you can make to balance the fighting fantasy system, so I definitely approve of fixed stats. However, given that skill and luck are traditionally generated with 1d6 plus 6 and stamina is 2d6 plus 12, I do wonder if all they've actually done is move the random generation a little bit later in the text. A luck of 6 is quite intimidating given that you've only got around a 42% chance of making your very first luck test. So I am guessing those numbers will be messed around with one way or another, or maybe they won't. The fun will be finding out. We also get a new stat, Amanur, which is a representation of your social standing in a way that combines fame and reputation and honour. It starts at 0 but can be increased by heroic deeds and decreased by behaving like an estate agent. These kind of mechanics require a bit of care and attention because they can wind up forcing a particular playstyle and effectively making part of the book redundant. I think if you're going to try and shape positive behaviour mechanically, then there needs to be some tangible in-game benefits to exhibiting negative behaviour, because that's the only way to present the player with a meaningful choice once you've introduced mechanics into it. There's also a chance to pick up some special skills along the way. There seems to be a list of 7, but I won't spoil it here. We will deal with them as and when they crop up. Lastly, there's a Day of the Week mechanic, which requires you to track whether it's Storm's Day, Moon's Day, Fire Day, Earth Day, Wind's Day, Sea Day, or High Day. This kind of thing can be great fun for adding little wrinkles to different playthroughs, boosting or weakening monsters, and so forth. There's clearly quite a lot going on here, but with 480 paragraphs to play with, I am confident that there's enough space for everything to shine. I have generated my character, who I have decided to call Toff Stroganoff, because that sounds like a suitably heroic name to me. They've got their starting stats and no equipment whatsoever, and with that, let's play Secrets of Salamonis. So instead of background, the opening text is titled, "Two heads are worse than one." So what do we do with it? Stick it? The voice is deep, gruff and menacing, and no doubt belongs to a large creature of some kind. A language user, so possessed of some intelligence, but probably none too friendly by the sounds of it. Instinct warns you to avoid whoever or whatever has started this conversation. Although the light is dim, your eyes soon become accustomed to the darkness. You are in a large cavern, lit only by the soft light from glowstones. An unpleasant smell hangs in the air. It is the smell of decaying food. The entrance lies a short distance away, but to reach it, you will doubtless have to face the creature that calls the cave home. It is then that you notice a roughly made wooden door in the wall of the cave to your right. "Hungry," comes a second voice. "Eat." That is not what you wanted to hear. What's more, there are at least 2 creatures in the cave with you. However, the second voice sounds a little softer and not as fearsome as the first. The creatures do not appear to be aware that you are awake, and that's the way you would like it to stay. But you are curious to know what you are dealing with. Your wrists and ankles have not been bound, so you get to your feet and tiptoe quietly around the edge of the cave. You peer around a large boulder, and there before your eyes is one of the most bizarre creatures you have ever seen. An ogre itself would be a fearsome sight, but this one has 2 heads, a 2-headed ogre. A rare and dangerous beast indeed, especially when both heads are angry at the same time with each other. And that is the introduction. So you know by now that I'm a big fan of being dropped straight into the action. This is doing that. It's also less than 2 pages long, which I also appreciate. I mean, a really well-written introduction can add a lot to the vibes of the adventure, but I do think there's generally a benefit for getting to that first choice as quickly as possible and trying to make it so that most of the background is something that you discover through playing the game. So we go straight for section 1. "Hungry," one head says gruffly, looking scornful at the other. "Frenish eat too much, fat belly wench." The ogress is clearly taken aback by this outburst. She fixes the other with a glare that could melt ice. "You drink too much orc ale. Wake up with sore head. Not me who make head sore. You drink all night and fight. Franish not want drinking or fighting. Wake up in jail. Manish is disgrace." "Well, you know clean cave. Home messy. Bones on floor. Twigs, loincloths, hobbit carcass. All over fur skin sleep blanket. Cave stinks. If Manish put things away where they belong, Franish not fight over clean cave." The argument is in full flow now, and it looks like it could turn into an angry clubbing match at any moment. So what to do? So we can wait for the ogre to exhaust itself, battling with itself, creep around the edge of the cave and make for the exit, or make a dash for the entrance. So, it's a really, really good, characterful, fun encounter right off the bat. I kind of want to wait. Well, is the ogre actually going to exhaust itself just fighting itself? Is it going to exhaust itself, or is it going to have plenty of gas in the tank left to deal with me? I feel like creeping around the edge of the cave and making for the exit is probably my best bet. You tiptoe across the floor of the cavern, but the light is dim and you step on a twig which cracks as it breaks in two. Test your luck. So we are stuck with this luck of 6. So with my luck of 6, I roll a 7, so I am unlucky. Luck now down to 5. So that's probably the first time in a really long time that I've failed a luck test straight out of the gate. So already this is doing mechanically interesting things. Immediately, the ochre awakens with a snort. The creature is furious you are trying to escape and reaches for its club. You turn, reaching for the sword at your belt, only to find it isn't there. Can't remember what happened to it, but you're hardly likely to scare a 2-headed ogre with your bare hands. The brute roars at being woken from its sleep and attacks. That is weird. I don't remember it falling asleep. Okay, well, apparently it falls asleep. Once again, we are enjoying, if that's the right word, Fighting Fantasy's traditionally loose approach to copy editing the text. While you are fighting the ogre, you must deduct 1 point when calculating your attack strength because you are unarmed. So, the ogre has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 10. I have a skill of 5 effectively and a stamina of 12. If I reduce the ogre's stamina score to 3 or fewer points, something happens. If the ogre reduces my stamina score to 8 points or below, something happens. And I think that's probably the thing that's going to happen because I am very bad at fighting. So, for the first time, I'm going to roll some dice. The ogre has reduced me to 8 stamina points, and I did no damage to the ogre, perhaps unsurprisingly. Find out what happens. It's very intriguing. You are losing the battle with the two-headed ogre, but as it prepares to take another swing at you with its club, you see your chance to escape. Taking your life in your hands, you run for the exit. Your pounding footsteps echo from the cave walls, and then you hear the surprised shouts and grunts of the ogre and the sound of it coming after you. With the two-headed ogre in hot pursuit, you sprint out of the cave. As you do so, you pass a small figure crouching just inside the entrance. The little man is dressed in bright green clothes and has pointed ears, bright orange hair, and a wicked grin on his face. "Mind how you go," he says, with a cheery wave as you run past him. "Is that a leprechaun?" "I think it might be." "That's a leprechaun. Everyone's absolute favourite mischievous little sprite." Outside the cave, dusk is falling and the shadows are thickening between the trees. As you are wondering which way to go, your ears prick up. In the far distance you can hear a high-pitched screeching sound. "Something wicked this way comes," says a voice at your feet. It is the little man again. He has followed you out of the cave. The sound is getting closer. You look up at the darkening sky, peering into the night in the hope that you might catch sight of whatever is making the noise. It must be some kind of animal. "What is coming?" You turn to ask your strange companion, but he has vanished. The sound is getting very loud now. It is more like a screaming than a screeching, and you cover your ears against a terrible din. You are filled with a dreadful fear, and not really knowing what you are doing, start to run. The trees press in on you on every side while the noise is so loud it is as if the whole sky is screaming. And then, in the darkness, you hit your head on a low branch. Very exciting. Haven't made many choices. I am getting bounced from pillar to post so far, which is a little bit disappointing. You open your eyes slowly. Your head is aching. The bright sunlight isn't helping. Bright sunlight? But night was falling just a moment ago. What's going on? Where are you? "Anyone know this passenger?" comes a voice from nearby. "That was a nasty crack on the head. Thank the gods you're all right. Shame the same can't be said for your backpack." You feel the splash of water on your face and your vision comes into focus at last. You are in a longboat and one of several passengers by the look of things. It wasn't a branch that hit you on the head, it was one of the oars. Lose 1 stamina point. Stamina now 7. You've been dreaming. As your vision clears, so does your mind, and suddenly you know where you are. Okay, so that sort of explains why the opening was really weird. It's because it was all a dream. Quite an irritating plot device if overused, but here I'm absolutely happy with it. I have to say it's quite fun to have that whole sequence, that very weird and strange sequence be a dream, and it makes sense, and it makes sense that some of the events are weird and odd and don't quite follow a normal pattern of cause and effect. Your vision clears and so does your mind, and suddenly you know where you are. Your journey began 12 days ago. You left your home having saved enough to pay for the voyage eastward to the fabled kingdom of Salamonis. This was a journey first by camel-drawn caravan across the windward plains, and then aboard a fleet of cargo-bearing longboats moored on the Whitewater River. Perhaps it was a little foolhardy, travelling alone at your age. Indeed, you were almost tempted to turn back on the 7th day, as you left the plains and boarded one of the boats. In the confusion, your backpack and all its contents were lost, or perhaps stolen. You may never know the truth, but you hold out a faint hope that you will be reunited with your backpack and its contents once again. Perhaps it will turn up in Salamonis. Now, I've never flown by plane, but I understand that losing your luggage is a important rite of passage for any frequent flyer, and I wonder if this is sort of a little nod to that. The pack contains some personal items of sentimental value, in particular your favourite book, Longbeard's Legends of the Windward Plains. There was also a short sword given to you by your grandfather, a change of underwear, your mother insisted, a few personal mementos, and all the money you had in the world. Admittedly, it wasn't a lot, but you are now penniless. Your only remaining possessions are the clothes you are wearing, and you have had nothing to eat for 3 days. Your mother would weep to see you in such a state. But you were determined to reach your destination. After all, your father was firm that you should get yourself an education, and the city is famed throughout the world as a centre of learning. You were enchanted long ago by the tales of Salamonis and its great riches, while your beloved Uncle Bunkle would read to you from Longbeard's book. But since the book disappeared with your backpack, all you have left is your memories of those wonderful stories. Of course, you knew each tale from start to finish, the heroes, the creatures, the treasures, and the dangers. But you wanted to see the places described within them for yourself, to follow your dream. For you, there was no turning back. We're on to another different section as well, and I've kind of had their cake and eaten it by virtue of doing the preamble as dropping you into the action and then have you wake up in the boat and then do the background there. So you kind of got a bit of both, which is not terrible. It is mid-afternoon when you finally arrive at Whitewater Landing, Salamonis' west port. As the longboat slows and prepares to dock, the quay becomes a hive of activity. Miscellaneous wharf rat types appear from nowhere to attend to the boats. Ragged porters bustle about on the gangplanks, offering to carry luggage into town, mend leaks or swab the decks. The stevedores are an unkempt lot, generally wearing well-used clothes and worn-out sandals. They busy themselves trying to find some way of making a few coins from the new arrivals, enough to feed themselves or, more likely, enough to drown their sorrows at the nearest inn. Those who are not capable of physical work become beggars. Indeed, beggars on makeshift crutches are all around the docks. They are infuriatingly persistent, hopping awkwardly alongside their victims with non-stop jabber and pleading like a swarm of stingflies. They have learned that if some victims are reluctant and do not make a donation straight away, just annoying them will usually get the same result in the end. You have no luggage, so you are grateful you do not have to deal with porters. You disembark from the longboat along with your fellow travellers, a flatlands barbarian by the name of Nanok, and a rotund herbalist who goes by the name Healing Hands. No sooner are you standing on the quayside than a middle-aged man wearing voluminous robes hurries over to you. "Would you be interested in a map of Salamonis?" he asks. "No visitor to our fine city should be without one. They are only 1 salacoin each after all." You explain that you have lost your backpack on the way here and have no money to buy anything. "How unfortunate," the man says, looking you up and down. "You have an honest face, and never let it be said that Rusnik Olsen abandoned anyone in need. I mean, what sort of welcome would that be to the greatest city in all Alanzia? So on this occasion, my information comes for free. A little local knowledge could prove invaluable, so what do you want to ask the man about Salamonis?" Well, before we do that, I do need to mention that there is a picture of Nanok, Rusnik Olsen and Healing Hands on the docks, and it is absolutely chuffing great. Really, really good, solid fantasy illustration, classic, strong, confident line work, very meticulous shading, loads of background characters, as well as the 3 main figures, all of whom are rendered really nicely. You've got the beggars in the background and people hustling and bustling to and fro, and a guard above, and you can see just a hint of the cityscape beyond. It is great and exactly the kind of art I really like in a game book. So after some understandable but more left field choices, it feels as though this is back to proper illustration. So we can ask Rusnik Olsen about, is it true the streets are paved with gold? Proper country boy question. Where can someone find work in the city? What coinage is used in Salamonis? Who's in charge? Or what can you tell me about the great centres of learning? Well, coinage is Sala coins. We know that much, so we don't need to ask that question. The streets are, I'm going to say, not paved with gold, so we don't need to ask that question. Which leaves us with who is in charge? Kind of irrelevant. It's some kind of posho of some description, I'm sure. Or maybe a council of poshos. And that kind of leaves us with looking for work or the great centres of learning. I think I'm going to ask about work because I do have a pressing need to eat something at some point. I would suggest you visit the Adventurers Guild as soon as possible. The Guildmaster is a retired adventurer himself. He posts up any jobs that are going on a board outside the front entrance. However, you will want to make sure that you keep away from the King's tax collector, Odious Pinchpenny. He has a habit of taking a little extra for his own operating costs. Where will I find him, you ask? Don't worry, my friend, Rusnik says with a chuckle. He will find you. So we can ask some more questions if we want. So let's go for the centres of learning. Well, Salamonis is renowned throughout all of Elansia for its ancient and extensive library, and of course a few leagues from here, in the forest of Ur, Vermithrax Moonchaser has his school of magic, but I don't think he's taking on any new apprentices at present. If it's some basic magic you're after, I could teach you spelling. No, not that sort of spelling, as in magic spells. But if it's your combat skills you're looking to improve, there's no better way than to learn on the job with strong arms, providing protection for one of the many merchant caravans that cross the plains. Then again, there are rumours of a training ground or testing ground, I'm not sure which, in the Forest of Spiders, away to the north, but I wouldn't know about that. Well, lots of information there, and potential for picking up some work as well. At that moment, an elderly noblewoman and her entourage disembark from a fine bark onto the quayside. Having an eye for a heavy tipper, Rusnik bids you good luck and farewell and bustles off to see if he can be of assistance to the noblewoman, waving a handful of maps to attract her attention. It's probably wise to leave the Whitewater landing area as soon as possible, but you are still curious about the docks and the people who make a living here. A makeshift marketplace has already sprung up and traders are bawling their wares to their customers. But what good is a market to you if you don't have any money? Do you have a city map? I do not, which means that somewhere in that conversation I could have got one. You have two choices. You can either head into the city or explore the docks, hoping to find a way to make some money legally or otherwise. Let's explore the docks. As you soon learn, this area is actually called the Boondocks, since the goods and visitors that arrive here are considered a boon to the city, and presumably because this author can't resist a pun. There are all manner of hawkers peddling goods and costermongers pushing their handcarts before them, crying, "Bread! Fish! Meat pies!" Suddenly you catch sight of a young urchin pushing his way through the crowd with a large backpack slung across his shoulders. Hang on, is that your backpack? You shout for the boy to stop, but instead he takes off into the mass of peddlers and their customers who are crowding the quayside. You set off in pursuit, but soon lose him in the throng, only to run slap bang into a pair of burly guards, wearing helmets and breastplates bearing the arms of the Port Authority. "Oi," snaps the taller of the two. "Look where you're going. Now's your chance. If you want to, you could try reporting the loss of your backpack to the guards, or would you rather just apologise and get out of their way as quickly as possible? I will report the theft, not because I think they'll be of any help. I don't trust guards as far as I can throw them, but I want to see whether we're dealing with City of Thieves levels of corruption or just ordinary coppers level of corruption." "Sirs," you say, During my voyage here, I lost my backpack and everything in it. Who should I report this to? Anyone you want, says the shorter of the two guards. It won't matter. No one will take any notice. And if they do find your pack, they'll most likely just keep it for themselves. Ha, ha. Now move along, says the taller guard, giving you a shove. Losing your balance, you fall to the ground, grazing your knees. Lose 1 stamina point. Stamina now 6. Slowly running out of stamina, and I literally haven't done anything yet. However, now you are so close to the ground, you catch sight of a trinket that someone must have dropped. You're not sure if it's worth anything or if it's only of sentimental value, but you decide to keep hold of it and pop it in your pocket just in case, either with a mind to returning it to its owner in due course or selling it to a peddler yourself to raise some much needed cash. Add the trinket to your equipment list. The boondocks are populated by all manner of shady-looking characters and animals too. Packs of hungry dogs and feral cats roam the area in search of scraps of meat. Suddenly, a fight breaks out among the feral animals. A high-pitched screech rises and ends when a dog, clearly in pain, limps away from the fight, not far from where you're sitting. You'd swear the animal issued a curse as it ran away, but no, you must have been mistaken. Dogs can't talk, can they? One day those bully boys will get what's coming to them, comes a gruff voice from behind you. You turn to see one of your companions from the longboat standing there. It is Nanok the Barbarian. They wouldn't treat a strong arm like that, that's for sure. There is no doubting Nanok's profession. With a powerful physique and a short temper, this mountain of a man strikes an imposing figure on the dockside, but his presence makes you feel slightly less anxious. You're sure that if you could tag along with him, you wouldn't run into any more trouble, and so you start making small talk with the barbarian, asking him whether he is pleased to be in Salamonis. For the last 5 years I have worked as a strong arm and risen to the rank of captain, he tells you. My travels have taken me to the 4 corners of Alanzia. When I was younger, I enjoyed the excitement of new sights, new places, new people. But now I just want an easier life. I have seen little of my wife, Tabitha. It's time to settle down. Perhaps start a family. Salamonis is my home. They promised Tabitha that after the last job they wouldn't take on any more strong-arm work. You're just starting out in the world and the barbarian is looking to retire. Which way are you headed? He asks. If you're looking for adventure, you'll be wanting the Adventurers Guild. So what will you reply? Yes, I'm heading to the Adventurers Guild, or no, I'm going to look for some work here in the boondocks. I think I'll head to the Adventurers Guild. Adventure would be good at this point. Much as I enjoy prattling about in cities, I do feel as though I'd like the plot to drive a little bit further forward before we have to pause the recording. So, yeah, the Adventurers Guild it is. Let's jump in with both feet. I'll walk with you, says Nanok, and the two of you set off together into town, heading in the direction of the Sunrise Gate and leaving the hustle and the bustle of the boondocks behind. As you walk, you ask the barbarian what life is like as a strong arm. He tells you that it was his job to keep convoys safe from marauding orcs and goblins. The longboat you arrived on was carrying miscellaneous sacks of cargo, including fine cloth and exotic foodstuffs. The hired strong-arms were there to take on any pirates the boat might have encountered during the journey, using their bows, arrows and swords to repel any attack. That is what it means to be a strong-arm, Nanok says, keeping the cargo safe whatever the danger. You should bear it in mind if you ever find yourself short of money. Luckily, you had no unwelcome encounters during your journey to Salamonis. There was nothing for the guards to do besides tell stories, drink and gamble. And it is often the drinking and gambling that are the ruination of the strong-arms, not marauding orcs and goblins. They will have either gambled away their entire wages before they get home, leaving nothing for their families, or they will drink it away on their first night back. Such is the life of a strong arm. Aha! There she is! Nanok suddenly declares, pointing. Tabitha, over here! His wife waves to him through the crowds, as does a young boy holding her hand. In tears, she runs to Nanok and hugs him. Nanok embraces her in return, holding her in his powerful arms. And who is this young soldier? He asks, fixing the youngster with a quizzical look. Whose boy is this? Why, this is Ben Boy, replies Tabitha. Your son. Nanook kneels down to face the boy. "Hello, son," he says. "I'm pleased to meet you, da," says the child. With one hand round his wife's waist and holding his son's hand with the other, Nanook bids you farewell and sets off for home. As you are going your separate ways, you hear Nanook ask, "How old are you, Ben boy?" "4," comes the child's innocent reply. "Do you hear that, Tabitha? The boy can't count. I've been away for 5 years, but he thinks he's 4. Oh dear. That hints at a potentially rather sad story about Tabitha. I mean, to be fair, he's been away for 5 years. She's, not super to blame for getting lonely in that time. But, I don't think that Nanook might actually be the father of that young lad. We gain 1 Amanur point and go onwards. So, Amanur now 1. Travelling eastwards along the Grand Parade, you pass a number of groups of locals engrossed in their own conversations. As you pass them, you offer a friendly smile, but most ignore you. Those who do acknowledge you give you an unwelcoming scowl in return. The Grand Parade, which is known as the Golden Way, is a magnificent avenue, as befits such a wealthy kingdom. Golden Way is the main road through the centre of the city. It is cobbled and lined with statues of the Grand Elders of Salamonis, past and present. The shops you see lining the road here sell luxury items such as exotic cooking spices and beautiful ladies' gowns. But the most wonderful feature is not even apparent. In fact, that is what makes it so special. Whilst lesser towns consider an open sewer cleansed by rainwater to be quite an advancement beyond the dig and bury home latrine, the sewer in Salamonis is totally hidden away underground. No splashing, no unpleasant smells, no unfortunate accidents resulting into falling into an active sewer. On top of that, the sewer is large enough for a man to stand up in, which could prove of military use in an emergency. A most ingenious idea by King Salamon. LVII. Is that 57? Yeah, of course it is. Don't know why I doubted it. Sometimes you just need to have the courage of your convictions. Wow, King Salamon 57. There's been a lot of Salamons. Out of the corner of your eye, you catch sight of a gaunt-looking figure hobbling away down a side street. But what has attracted your attention is the fact that he is carrying a backpack that looks very similar to yours. There must be many adventurers in a place like Salamonis all carrying their own packs, but if there's a chance it could be yours, surely you have to investigate. Do you want to set off down the side street after the skinny man, or keep heading along the Grand Parade? I'll head off after the skinny man. Like I say, I am quite keen that at some point something should happen. I would say I'm enjoying this opening. It's nice to see a book kind of take its time in setting the scene, but at the same time, I am getting a little bit twitchy and a little bit eager to get into some kind of actual scrape. You turn off the Golden Way into the shaded side street. It does not take long for the man to realise he is being followed, and despite his limp, he starts to quicken his step and disappears around a corner ahead of you before you can catch up with him. Reaching the entrance to the twisting alleyway, you can see neither hide nor hair of the man, and so set off at a run, hoping to catch up with him around the next corner. It is as you are picking up the pace that you trip, your foot catching on a loose cobblestone. You are sent sprawling in the dirt, and graze your knees and bang your elbows, lose 2 stamina points. Am I just going to die from falling over several times? That would be deeply disappointing, but also quite funny. I'm now down to 4 stamina, so it is a possibility. It is a genuine possibility that I could wind up dying of falling over. I mean, people have died of falling over, especially while running on cobbles. That's a thing that has occasionally happened. Anyway, picking yourself up again, you hobble along the alleyway but can see no sign of the man with the backpack. Seeing as how you have no other choice, you return to the main thoroughfare. The Grand Parade leads all the way to the Royal Palace, but before it gets there, it opens out into a square packed with stalls which are shutting up for the day. This is Salamonis' famous bazaar. Surrounding the square are inns and shops, and a rather dilapidated building that looks like a cross between a temple and a tavern. Above the door hangs a sign in the shape of a shield bisected by a sword. This must be the Adventurers Guild. The sun is sinking behind the rooftops to the west, casting long shadows across the market square. There is a board outside the guild house displaying the jobs that are currently available. However, in large red letters at the bottom of the board are the words, "Only open to guild members. Adventurous permits, 2 gold pieces." Clearly, if you want to become an adventurer, it's going to cost you. The heavy iron-bound door to the guild house is closed, and by the orange glow of the setting sun, you see that a sign has been hung on the door that reads, "Closed, come back tomorrow." You try the door, but it is clearly locked and bolted from the inside. Banging on the door doesn't do any good either. "Can't you read?" You turn to see it is one of the stallholders who's packing up for the day that is addressing you. You tell him that you have travelled from your home to Salamonis with the intention of making your way in the world as an adventurer. "Oh, that explains it," mutters the man, although you're not quite sure what it explains exactly. "Look, you can't just rock up here and call yourself an adventurer. You have to join the guild first, but that'll cost you. If it's a job you're after, Pig Boy Snouter's always hiring at the Slime and Swine Guttery. You'll find his place outside the West Gate." You thank the man for his advice and decide what to do. Choose an option from the list below that you haven't tried already. Make your way to the Slime and Swine Guttery. I mean, that sounds pretty bad as a place. Explore the docks or ask the stallholder if he's hiring at present. I'd be amazed if he is. I mean, running a stall is generally a one-man operation, and he is one man. So I guess we will have to hold our nose and forget that we're a vegan. Well, I'm a vegan. You're probably not, statistically speaking. And make our way to the Slime and Swine Guttery. You follow the path northwest from the port in the direction of West Gate. Along the way, you check with passers-by that you are heading in the right direction, but why does everyone laugh when they hear you're going to Snouters? When the wind changes direction, you realise why. The stench is absolutely horrendous. The guttery itself is little more than a ramshackle hut buzzing with flies. As soon as you set eyes on the owner, you understand why he's called Pig Boy Snouter. It has nothing to do with the fact that he deals in pig guts. He looks like one. "You looking for work?" Snouter calls to you. He is wearing a filthy apron that is smeared with blood, and much worse. "How did you know?" you ask. Snouter laughs. "It's the only reason anyone comes here. Otherwise we have to go to them." Do you want to tell Snouter that you are indeed here looking for work, or do you think it would be wiser to turn on your heel and head back into town? "No, I'm here looking for work, and I'm happy to admit it. Just need 2 gold, maybe 3, for the adventurer's permit and some food." You follow Snouter inside the hut, wondering how long you can hold your breath for. This is where Snouter and his younger brother Jowler undertake what is surely the most disgusting job in all of Salamonis. They process the rotting guts of dead pigs, fish, and other odorously decaying animals. Clearly, Snouter's hygiene is lax, and for some, such work is too much to bear. They get physically sick on the job, which only adds to the stench. It's said that both Snouter and Jowler can only run the business because they have no sense of smell whatsoever. However, the Guttery has a reputation for producing the finest rotten entrails in Alanzia. Once suitably decomposed, the Guttery's products are exported, mainly to Shazar, where the acidic slime is considered a rare delicacy, forming the basis of a piquant gravy known as Lamoy. So maybe a little nod to that fermented fish sauce that the Romans were so keen on. What was it called? They used to put it on everything, apparently. I've seen people try it on documentaries, and for modern taste, it is apparently unbelievably unpleasant, but the Romans could not get enough. Garum, that was the name of the fish sauce. Garum. "Look," Snouter admits, "well, no, it isn't a glamorous job. Some people can't stand it for longer than a couple of hours, but just stick it out and I'll pay well for a fair day's work. And it's tax-free," he says. "After all, a hog may have habits that disgust, but who would turn his nose up at its meat? If you can just put up with the stink for a few hours, this seems like a good way to make a decent wage. 5 salacoins for a day's labour." And so you shake Snouter's hand and set to work. You are given the job of separating the fish guts from swine fat, and the stench is almost overwhelming. So we've got a random die roll. I think from the adventure sheet, 5 Salacoins is equal to half a gold piece. So we're some way off that adventuring license, but we do need to find out whether or not we lose our lunch. Not that we've had any lunch, but whether we lose our absence of lunch as a result of this task. And I've rolled a 1, which doesn't sound great. 1 to 3 or 4 to 6. It is not long before the stink makes your eyes water and you feel the gorge rise in your throat. Deduct 1 stamina point. Stamina now 3. Raising the possibility that you can die by puking yourself to death in a guttery. Not good. Swallowing hard, you try and put the thought of the smell out of your head and just focus on the job in hand. You stick at it all day and suffer no more ill effects. As they say, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Snouter appreciates your help, and at the end of the day he hands over 5 Salacoins. 5 Salacoins. We are a quarter of the way to our goal of becoming an adventurer. We gain 2 Amanur points as well. He offers you another day's work, but you have had enough, so Amanur now 3. I understand, he says, but you've done a good job. Perhaps I can tempt you with another offer. I'll give you 2 Salacoins for each new worker you recruit. I've just had a big order in from Shazar. If I don't get more workers, I'm going to have to turn the order down. It's a no-lose situation. If you come across a section with a pig's head symbol next to it, you can roll 1 die. If you roll a 4 to 6, you have just recruited a worker to Snouter's guttery. Keep track of how many workers you recruit in this way on your adventure sheet. That is a fun little mechanic. I like that a lot. Leaving the guttery, you head back into town, hoping you can leave the foul stench of the place behind you. Do you have the beggar's mark? I do not. The sun is lower in the sky now. The day is wasting away. Do you want to return to the docks and take a look around, or do you want to make your way to the Adventurers Guild? I guess it's the docks for me. No, I can't go back to the docks. Or can I? No, I think I've got to go to the Adventurers Guild to avoid being in a loop. An imposing and insurmountable stone wall surrounds the city, which has done a good job of keeping aggressors out in the past. You head away from the docks, through the imposing Gate of the Moon and into the Grand Parade. As you pass through the gate, your jaw drops and you gasp. The port area felt wild and dangerous, not quite what you were expecting from the stories you've been told about Salamonis, but once within the gate, the city's fine architecture is awe-inspiring. Again, this feels as though it's a little bit out of sequence. Do you have the trinket? I do. A bit further along the Grand Parade, you notice a mangy dog sitting in the gutter, scratching its haunches and licking itself. You recognise it as the dog you saw running off from the docks, having been savaged by a cat. The scratching has caused an old wound to reopen, and the poor thing is evidently in pain. Hey, mate. You turn around to determine where the voice came from, but not one of the other people making their way into the city is even looking at you, never mind trying to make conversation. Ruff, ruff, it's me, comes the voice again. Here, right in front of you. Have you never come across a talking dog before? You're astonished to discover that it is actually the dog that is speaking to you. All right, how about this one? Woof, woof. Well, I may look like a dog, but I'm not. You won't get me to fetch, so don't bother trying. Pointless if you ask me. Neither do I gnaw on pig bones for hours. Too hard to the teeth at my age. Meat and ale for me, if you please, but I can talk. Do you want to engage the dog in conversation, or would you rather ignore it and keep walking without looking back? I guess I'll engage the dog in conversation. You have so many questions you hardly know where to start. What species of dog is it that can speak, or a victim of cruel sorcery? My brother once insulted a curse witch, the dog explains. Told her she was blind as well as ugly, so she cursed him. Well, duh, it's a curse witch. That's what curse witches do, curse people. Only trouble is, he was right, her eyesight was poor. She couldn't see which one of us to curse. She guessed wrong. Now he's fine, and I'm trapped in a dog's body. So what would you do? Can you have the curse removed? You ask. Oh yeah, just need to build up some Salacoins, some herbs, and find a curse witch who can remove curses. Then bring in my brother and transfer the curse to him. It's either that, or I've got to somehow capture the breath of the one who cursed me, but I don't think that's very likely, do you? So, I'm looking for my good-for-nothing brother. He doesn't want to be a dog, so he's keeping well away. You sympathise with the dog, even though you're not sure what you can do to help it become a man again. Buy a drink for me, would you? This curse has given me a terrible thirst. We could share a flagon of ale if you like. You explain that you have lost your backpack and everything that was in it, including your money bag. In the same boat, eh? Then how about you and I do a little hustle? It's easy when people think you're a dog. She's kept me in ale and meat for this last couple of years, that's for sure. Look, here comes a mother of 2 bratty girls, perfect. So here's what we'll do. I'll pretend I'm rabid and frighten them, then you come along and save them and pocket the reward. Do you want to go along with the dog's money-making scheme? Yeah, sounds great. You decide to go along with the dog's plan because, as the old saying goes, even a mangy dog can be a man's best friend. Wait, what's your name? You ask. Dog name or human name? Dog, you say, with a smile. Dog. What's yours? Well, if you're a dog called Dog, then I'm a human called Human. Fair enough, the animal concedes. Nah, get ready. Dog the dog hides around the corner of a building and limbers up while he's waiting for the woman folk to draw closer. Then, right on cue as they come within a few metres of his hiding place, Dog leaps out into the street, his lips drawing back in a terrible snarl. He starts barking and the girls start screaming. It is at this point that you rush in and position yourself between Dog and the womenfolk, pretending to kick the savage animal. However, your acting is not as good as Dog's and you land the blow. Dog yelps in pain and scampers off around the corner, his tail between his legs. You turn to the startled mother. Are you all right? You ask in all seriousness. Evidently shaken by the encounter, the 3 victims of your scam are all sobbing. Finding their breath again, they heap their thanks and praise upon you. Who knows if we'd have survived if you hadn't been there to save us, says the mother. We can't thank you enough. Gratitude is all well and good, but you're not hearing the particular words you've been hoping for. Reward, tip, salacoin, anything like that. Do you want to drop a more obvious hint? Tell them about your lost backpack or walk away ashamed of what you've done in trying to cheat the ladies? I think we'll go for the lost backpack. I feel weird dropping the obvious hint, and I probably should be a little bit ashamed at terrifying some ordinary folk just going about their day. I think I'll take the opportunity to try and find out whether there's any chance of finding my backpack. With still no obvious reward forthcoming, you tell the mother how you lost all your possessions as you transferred from the caravan to the longboats. She is extremely sympathetic, but she still has nothing to offer you. My name is Julina Valezzo, she says, and I know people in high places in Salamonis. Perhaps sometime in the future we may bump into each other again, and I can help you then. She promises to keep a lookout for your backpack, but surely the chances of her coming across it are extremely small. Jelena and her daughters go their way, and when they are out of sight, Dog emerges from his hiding place. Ay, 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 he says, nursing his ribs. You didn't need to make it look so realistic, you know, and with nothing to show for it. You apologise and suggest trying again. What, get another kicking for my pains? No, I think it's time we went our separate ways, he says, and limps off into the back streets of the city. Lose 1 luck point, but gain 2 Amanor points, and then we move on. Amanor now 5, luck now 4. And now we end up back at the Grand Parade, and there's a pig's head, so I can try and recruit a worker, but I fail to do so. So I'm not going to reread the entirety of the Grand Parade description. Just say that we're back in the Grand Parade, somewhat near the Adventurers Guild, and we've just seen a skinny man running down the side street. So I guess we will ignore him, because nothing good happens if we follow him, and keep heading along the Grand Parade. So that gets us to the stall holder, and I guess the only thing we can do is ask him if he's hiring at present. I cannot remember for the life of me what voice I did for the stall holder. You need a permit from the Tradesmen's Guild to work in the bazaar, the man tells you. You got one of those? You shake your head. Didn't think so. You walk away disconsolately. It feels like you need a permit to do anything in Salamonis, but permits cost money, and your life savings are in your backpack along with all your worldly possessions. What's the matter, friend? The voice belongs to a lean man dressed in fine clothes that have nonetheless seen better days. He has a curling moustache on his top lip, a goatee on his chin, and a twinkle in his eye. You look like an honourable chap, he says, putting his arm around one of your shoulders. I mean, you've got an honest face. I'm surprised to see someone like you in an impecunious state. You didn't realise you were in an impecunious state. You thought Salamonis was a kingdom. That's quite a good gag. You need to earn some Salacoins. Well, Rodriguez is your man. But why work for a living when you can grift? Grifting is far easier. You don't have to take insults or deal with angry men. What's grifting, you ask? Sounds a bit dodgy. It's only dodgy if you get caught, Rodriguez replies, lowering his voice. And I never get caught. The two of you sit down on a bench nearby and Rodriguez tells you what he has in mind. We start at the nearest inn, right? Inns mean ale. Ale means marks, and marks are what we are looking for. People who've had a skinful already, who are not as alert as they were earlier in the day. And we're going to use them to entertain the whole inn. If you want to go along with Rodriguez and try your hand at grifting, you can. If you think it sounds a little too dubious an activity and that you should leave Rodriguez to work his con tricks alone, you can do that as well. I'm going to go and do the grift. I feel as though this is an interesting point to test my supposition that for Amanor to create meaningful choices, you've got to be able to make some money out of this grift. Otherwise, you just simply have to ignore anyone who tries to get you to do anything even remotely dodgy. The inn is just around the corner, says Rodriguez. As you make the turn into Half-Darned Lane, you can hear a raucous crowd chattering and laughing a short distance ahead. You squint to read the sign hanging outside the inn. What's this? You snort. The Half-Darned Sock? What kind of name is that for an inn, and why is it only half-darned? Ah, yes, replies Rodriguez. There's history behind this particular hostelry. It's the oldest one in Salamonis. However, our present need is cash, and a drunken crowd like this is very easy to grift from. You open the heavy wooden door and enter the inn. The noise from inside is deafening. The place is heaving. It's as though you must have come across a fighting bear pit mid-bout. You can hardly hear yourself think. It seems something special arrived with the longboats and now everyone is celebrating. There is a picture of the rough and tumble at the Half-Darned Sock, showing a barbarian-looking fellow. Looks like he might be about to smack a pair of heads together, and he doesn't look best pleased. I guess we're going to find out why. It's another really solid bit of art, with the possible exception of one of the barbarian's hands, which doesn't look superb. I feel like I'd have noticed if the artist wasn't good at hands, because I have read pretty much all of Azimuth. I don't recall there being an issue. And glancing elsewhere, no, he's perfectly good at hands. This is just a weird little aberration. It's always like this after the longboats arrive, Rodriguez yells over the noise. The sailors take their wages and go straight off to the nearest inn. Often they drink or gamble away their lot in only a few hours, to the despair of their wives and children. By the entrance, a heated argument has broken out between a staggering half-elf and a woozy sailor. The dispute has progressed from harsh words to pushing and shoving, and it is all about who is entitled to sit on a wooden stool that has become vacant. By now, the two have proceeded to fisticuffs, and their jostling is starting to annoy the customers. A shrill whistle pierces the air. Almost immediately, a burly strong arm appears to break up the fight. He picks up both miscreants by their collars and throws them out into the street. They look at each other quizzically. What right did this strong arm have to manhandle them, and so roughly? The pair curse him and vow they will get their own back on the barbarian. But they have completely forgotten what the argument was all about. The sailor offers to buy the half-elf a mug of ale. The two re-enter the inn, smiling now with their arms around each other's soldiers. Quite a few sailors will be going home to their wives empty-handed. Rodriguez comes in, and that's where we come in. They're going to spend all their cellar coins on drinking or gambling anyway. We just need to make sure some of it comes our way. Here, let me buy you an ale and I'll explain what we're going to be doing. You find a table and I'll get the drinks in. As you squeeze through the crowd looking for somewhere to sit, you notice a coin on the floor. Do you want to pick it up or would you rather ignore it? I'm going to pick it up. I need coins and I need them bad. It is a silver Salacoin. No one appears to be looking for it, so what do you want to do? Try and find its rightful owner and return the coin? Give it to Rodriguez or keep it for yourself? So, I feel like trying to find the rightful owner of a dropped coin in a busy pub full of sailors is going to be a task. I think there's going to be a fair few people who will swear up and down that they misplaced a Salacoin. Give it to Rodriguez? Why? No, I don't think so. I think we're just going to keep it. You pocket the Salacoin, but as you do, you notice that the king's face has been scratched with a knife. So it looks like Salamon the 57th has a scar on his cheek. Add the Salacoin to your equipment list. Do I add it just as a Salacoin or do I add it as a scarred Salacoin? I'm going to do both. So I'm now up to a whopping 6 Salacoins. You find a couple of seats in a quieter part of the inn, and Rodriguez joins you there a few moments later. He's carrying 2 mugs of spicy hobgoblin mead. You don't know whether he actually paid for them or whether he scammed the landlord. You take a sip of your drink and ask him what he has in mind. Well, he begins, I have a cheeky little grift which should get us a few free drinks and maybe even a room for the night. It's a card trick. He gets up from his seat again. Come on, follow me. Do you want to follow him or do you want to leave him to his grifting? I want to follow him. You follow Rodriguez to the bar where he immediately starts to address the landlord. I'm going to show you a trick which quite honestly astonishes me every time I do it. I kid you not. You are going to pick 2 cards and with a little magic I'll tell you what they are without even seeing them. Hopefully you might find it entertaining enough to let me have a room for the night. Oh no, it's even worse than I thought. I thought he was just going to rob people, but it's worse, he's going to do close-up magic. Oh no, I've fallen in with a stage magician. This is embarrassing. The landlord is intrigued. Come on then, he says. Let's see what you've got. Rodriguez lays a pack of cards on top of the bar. So here we go. This is a pack of cards numbered 1 to 9 in 4 suits. I'm going to shuffle them. He riffles the deck like a professional card sharp. And now, pick a card, any card, and show it to everyone. The landlord picks a card from the shuffled deck, revealing it to the crowd of onlookers that is gathering by the bar. It's a 6. He then places it face down on the counter. Now, how are you at sums? Rodriguez asks. Considering your line of work, I expect you're pretty good, or you would have gone out of business by now. The onlookers, the regulars in particular, laugh at hearing this line. Remember the number on your card, Rodriguez tells the landlord. Double it, add 5, and multiply the number you have now by 5. You got it? The landlord confirms that he has. Now I want you to choose another card. He does so, and add this number to the total you've already got in your head, and then tell me the final total. 89, announces the landlord. And then your 2 cards. Are you ready for this? The crowd are on tenterhooks and a hush has descended. A 6 and a 4. The landlord looks astonished. He turns over the 2 cards. Gasps are heard from around the bar. He has indeed chosen a 6 and a 4. True to his word, the landlord offers Rodriguez a room for the night. So, there's something mathematical going on with the trick. Yeah, I feel as though the answer is effectively that every single possible combination has a unique number associated with it. That's what I've sort of come up with. That would be like the easiest way of doing it. Then you just have to memorize all of the possible combinations and the numbers that are associated with them. Settling on a table of dwarf miners who are drinking together at a table in a darkened corner, you try and give them the same banter Rodriguez gave the landlord. Although you are not as well practiced at this sort of thing as he is, you do actually manage to persuade the 5 dwarves to agree to give you 2 Salacoins each if you can correctly guess the second card they pick. A burly dwarf with muscular arms and a shaved head goes first. He picks a card. Okay, now double it, you tell him. Add 5 and multiply the number you now have by 5. Then when you're ready, pick another card. Another of the miners selects the second card, and a hush falls over the table as they work out to the final sum. 118, the dwarf says at last, beaming at his friends proudly. So what were the 2 cards the dwarves picked? If you know, turn the solution into a 2-digit number and turn to that section now. If you can't work out which cards they picked or the section you turn to makes no sense, meaning you've got it wrong, and we turn to another paragraph. Right, there's going to be a pause while I engage the little grey cells. Okay, I have worked it out. Basically every number for the first card automatically generates an unique number, as you'd expect from multiplying it. It's very, very straightforward. There's only 1 to 9, so there's only 9 possible numbers, and you just got to find the one that is less than the new score. So 9 times 2 is 18, plus 5 is 23. If you multiply that by 5, that gets you 115, which is the unique number for 9s, and their total was 118, so the only possible cards that can be is a 9 and a 3. That creates a section number of 93. The 2 cards you picked were a 9 and a 3, you tell the dwarves. The shaven-headed miner turns the cards over on the table in front of him, dumbstruck. You are right! The dwarves reluctantly hand over your winnings, accompanied by a lot of grumbling and complaining. Add the 10 Salacoins to your adventure sheet and gain 2 points of Amanar. The Salacoins jangling in your pocket, you make your way back to the bar and tell the landlord you would like a room for the night. That'll be 1 gold piece or 10 Salacoins, he tells you. You can afford it, but are you willing to pay for a room for the night, or would you prefer to sleep on the street so as to save as much money as possible? Well, I think I'm probably going to take the bed for the night, but I think on that note we should probably call this recording to a reasonably successful conclusion. I've got some money. I've almost run out of health, so I'm hoping that a good night's sleep will restore at least a single point of stamina and make me slightly closer to the land of the living. But yeah, this is not what I was expecting at all. It's really interesting. I was expecting this to be a pretty classic fighting fantasy book, and it is so low-key. It really is. And I think that's a brave choice to make in a fantasy adventure, particularly in a 480 section adventure. I think that's a really brave choice to make the opening just about trying to find some money and a job and doing the kind of country hick in the big city thing. I'm assuming that at some point the world will turn out to be in peril because this is fighting fantasy after all, but it's a really unique way to open the adventure. We've seen lots of stuff take place in cities in the opening. As I've said before, getting into scrapes in cities is one of my favourite things in the world, but I've not seen anything really lean into that kind of working class, peasant with big dreams kind of vibe, and those dreams sort of butting up against the indifferent reality of a city that doesn't care whether you feel like you've got a special destiny or not. That's really cool. So I'm looking forward to going and playing this through on my own time. I will be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. I have finished Secrets of Salamonis, although finished is something of a loaded term with this book since it's a lot more open world than the typical fighting fantasy novel. I have certainly beaten it, but there's a lot of scope for experimentation and challenging yourself that I haven't had time to explore. Before we start teasing apart what makes this book tick, we need to address the question of how my first playthrough ended. Everything seemed to be going fairly well, but then I volunteered to be a caravan guard, and on the journey to Shazar, I tangled with a monster called a Gretch, a kind of lizard man with knives for hands. It ate me, A tragic end for Toff Stroganoff to be sure, but we had the same exact skill, so it was always going to be a coin toss as to whether I won the battle. It also ate me on my second playthrough, despite me having improved the early game to secure a higher skill. Just for fun, it ate me again on my third playthrough as well, and that's the point I stopped worrying about the dice on that playthrough. Sometimes life is too short, and sometimes, for one reason or another, a monster absolutely has my number. It's funny how that happens sometimes, the vagaries of chance deciding that for whatever reason, this one somewhat tough monster is actually an unbeatable engine of destruction. I remember 7 times snooker world champion Stephen Hendry saying there was one low-ranked player he could never beat. He played him exactly 3 times in his career and lost all of those encounters. Probability is a strange thing, and you'll go mad trying to understand the interplay between the cold logic of numbers and the textured and surprising world that results from them. Musings on the nature of the universe aside, I find Secrets of Salamonis a fascinating book. I wasn't entirely sold on it at the beginning, I think because I kept dying at the same point, but as I got further along it began to win me over, and I think it finished pretty strong. It is an odd book, to be sure, something of a hybrid between a classic fighting fantasy book and a more modern open world style game book, and I think it actually does a great job of balancing these two elements to serve up something that feels surprising in the context of fighting fantasy, but still absolutely feels like a part of the fighting fantasy series. There has definitely been a house style for fighting fantasy books that looms large over the series as a whole, and in some ways keeps the series trapped in the past. In the 80s, fighting fantasy books were a quantum leap forward in the medium, the first really big selling series to go beyond the simplistic design of choose-your-own-adventure books and capture something of the fun of tabletop role-playing systems without getting bogged down in complex rules. It's lightning in a bottle stuff, but fighting fantasy hasn't shown much signs of evolving with the times. We've seen creators really push what's possible in a game book, and insofar as there is a modern game book scene, it feels like the most successful books are ones that lean into an open world design, although there's still a few people keeping the traditional design approach alive, technically I suppose including me. Interestingly, you can see a lot of parallels between fighting fantasy and its most obvious direct inspiration, Dungeons & Dragons. Role-playing games have come a long way since Dungeons & Dragons was the only dog in the fight, but D&D has remained oddly resistant to wider developments in the field. It's refined its approach, but it hasn't changed its approach. It's still an oddly clunky, system-heavy game that revolves mostly around killing orcs. You can also see the same thing happening in the case of the Warhammer games, with the core games feeling decidedly retro in some ways, though there are supplementary game systems that do have a bit more of a modern twang to them. What D&D, Warhammer and Fighting Fantasy share is a sense that they are such big beasts in their respective spaces that they're almost separate but related hobbies. Part of the things that make them seem clunky in comparison with some of the other things that are out there is also part of their unique appeal. Are there better role-playing systems than D&D? Almost anything by this point is technically a better role-playing system than D&D, but playing D&D still feels like D&D, and you mess with that core appeal at your peril. So in many ways I'm grateful that my favourite gamebook series hasn't evolved more with the times. There's definitely been experiments along the way. The comparatively recent Blood of the Zombies has an entire combat system overhaul, for example, but underneath that obvious change, the rest of the book was as old school as the author himself, being a largely linear exploration of a space, not unlike a dungeon, despite the modern accoutrement. Obviously, there was a time when fighting fantasy was arguably much more experimental in the early days, with science fiction titles being a staple until Skylord killed them off, and other titles exploring a range of different settings, but that definitely started to quiet down, and the series became much more content to plough a specific furrow, with only such refinements that fit within the basic shape of a narrative-driven adventure game. I personally don't see this as a bad thing. Just getting a bit better over time at doing the thing you do, that is good. I'm a big Motorhead fan. I'm never going to be disappointed by a series sticking to its guns. What I love most about Secrets of Salamonis is that it's found a way to have its cake and eat it too. You've got a fairly easy-going opening, and then you get a free choice of no less than 5 quests, with a further 2 seemingly available but gated behind progress checks. You want to be careful, as the day tracking mechanic will mean that you only get to do 5 out of the 7 quests, and some of them are much more helpful than others. Only 2 of them are strictly required to beat the book, and they are helpfully flagged as the toughest quests, which is a nice hint that you probably want the rewards for beating them. Another quest isn't strictly required, but provides a necessary item that can be found in the market, but is sufficiently expensive to make doing the quest a generally better option, unless you enjoy making life difficult for yourself on purpose. Once you've done your quests, there's a linear final sequence which reveals the various plot strands that were hinted at across the course of the book are all connected to a larger plot, one that involves a horde of undead fish bats attacking Salamonis, so you get your big world in peril moment as well. The way in which the backstory gradually emerges through apparently unconnected quests is joyous. It uses the freedom of the open structure to allow the story to emerge in a non-linear fashion, drip-feeding you hints until the big reveal of just who is behind the plague of unsettlingly airborne death piranhas. It's a technique I really like, and it's one I'm planning to steal. There's quite a few hoops you're going to have jumped through to win the day, but there's enough hints dropped through the text that you're likely going to have come across the items you need or have a good idea where to get them. When one of the items it is strongly hinted you're going to need is Unicorn Horn, and one of the available adventures is labelled Obtain the Horn of the Black Unicorn, it doesn't take a genius to work out that this might be a good place to go looking. Aside from the items found on adventures, there's other necessary items that can be obtained from the market, where you'll find the usual slightly tiresome list of random items, so that you can play the guess what bit of oddly named tat will randomly turn out to have been a vital purchase game. Happily, you can visit the market multiple times, and there's a few occasions where the book is kind enough to give you a heads up before the item is strictly required. This is actually a lovely little feature of the book. I'd like to highlight a couple of instances. First is a rope, where you are explicitly advised by an NPC that you should buy a rope and some nose plugs before you venture into a swamp. Neither the rope nor the nose plugs is useful in the swamp itself, which makes buying them feel a bit rubbish, but while the nose plugs have no use at all in the game that I've been able to find out, the rope turns out to be extremely handy later, so you get rewarded for taking the advice, just not in the way you would expect. Similarly, it's possible to tangle with the undead piranhas that will eventually turn out to be the big bad of the story, and while doing so feels quite scary, it does point to a few helpful clues as to how to deal with them the next time you see them. This to me is more or less the perfect way of doing a hybrid between the open world gamebook and the traditional gamebook. It manages to show off some of the best elements of both, the freedom of the open world and the narrative strength of the traditional approach. It's not a perfect implementation by any stretch of the imagination. It's not quite sure as a book how to reliably differentiate between repeatable sections and areas you can only do once, and that creates some confusion that I think a hardened open world designer would have found easy to resolve. The issues with fighting fantasy proofreading are also front and centre. The error section of the book's Fighting Fantasy wiki page has 25 separate entries, ranging from spelling mistakes to things that potentially break the game, though thankfully there's nothing that absolutely definitely makes the game fall apart. There's a part of the opening where you can end up needing to go round in a bit of a circle unless I got something wrong on my recorded playthrough, and it's certainly possible to wind up with an Amanor score too low to take on any of the remaining quests, which means you can't progress, but the gamebook doesn't realise this is a possibility, meaning that you have to either realise it for yourself that your adventure is over or redo one of the quests. I do feel like open world books need more vigorous playtesting because there's more moving parts and therefore more chances for the text to throw up an unexpected outcome. There's also a specific encounter you need to beat the game, which feels like it ought to have been repeatable. It's part of the market, but you can only visit it once for some reason, and it contains the least well-flagged, strictly necessary item in the entire game, a Dragon Carnix that turns out to be a crucial buy, despite no one mentioning it until the moment it's required, as far as I can tell. There is a very obtuse reference to it. At one point, a character you meet has a dragon tattoo, but actually getting the chance to buy the Carnix when you've got enough cash to afford it, and ideally some of the other handy items available from the same vendor, requires sufficiently careful sequencing that it seems bordering on unreasonably hard given the relatively relaxed difficulty elsewhere, which I'll address later. The narrative side is generally strong as well, with a couple of choices I did find odd. The dream sequence that opens the book feels completely redundant, except to set up a little callback at the end that perhaps indicates you're in some kind of Inception-like sequence of nested dreams. I didn't enjoy the opening dream sequence. It felt too narrow, and I think the space it takes up could have been profitably used to add some more decisions to the finale, which ends up being a series of item checks. That's hardly uncommon for fighting fantasy. The series of item checks has a long and venerable tradition as the conclusion to a fighting fantasy book, but I do think the paragraphs would have been better spent at the end than in a faintly annoying opening sequence. You could have just started us off in the longboat, that would have been fine. There's also another dream sequence, possibly adding to the Inception vibe by being a dream inside a dream inside a dream. This one is in some ways even odder in that it's basically running a version of the opening of Warlock of Firetop Mountain. I'm not sure what this achieves except to remind you that Steve Jackson was there at the beginning, and I found it a little bit frustrating to be taken out of the main action just as it was really getting interesting. While I get the urge to acknowledge the lead author's link to the roots of fighting fantasy, other than providing an Easter egg for those who remember the first book, it doesn't add anything to Secrets of Salamonis to have this odd digression, especially as there are a couple of other nods to early books in the series that work much better, being broadly throwaway references. This book takes place before Citadel of Chaos, and there's one ending which strongly suggests you can end up becoming the hero of that story and taking on Balthus Dire instead of the Secrets of Salamonis, and that kind of thing, that is tremendous fun. The last critique of the narrative is that I found the opening section in Salamonis almost a little too low-key. Much as I am a fan of the pathetic aesthetic most memorably embodied in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where characters were likely to start off as apprentice rat catchers and dung collectors, the opening portion of Salamonis has a slightly aimless quality to it as you bounce from pillar to post in search of some kind of lucky break. I think the problem for me is that you don't feel like captain of your own destiny, which is certainly realistic given the ways in which economic realities trammel individuals, but not really the fantasy I'm looking for in a game book. Now, things do pick up, and pick up a lot once you get access to the big list of quests and can start taking control of your fate. Once I had grasped the overall shape of the book, I actually ended up warming much more to the opening. There's a mechanic that rewards you for really optimising your journey through the mean streets, which I'll talk about in a moment, but it's the middle two-thirds of the book that really sing for me. There's quite a lot of variety of encounters in Secrets of Salamonis. You get a fair number of fights, but it's hardly excessive, and there's a whole host of interesting people to meet, from the roguish Rodriguez to the tax collector Pinchpenny, who seems to be running some kind of jazz tax system with a heavy focus on improvisation and pulling tax rates out of thin air. This is actually more historically accurate than you might think. Once upon a time, tax collectors were simply given a region and a minimum amount they had to collect for the state, and how they actually went about it was up to them. Anything they managed to extract beyond what the state required of them was pure profit. Probably my favourite part of the opening is going to work for Snouter at the Guttery, which has a properly grim medieval vibe. It's an encounter dripping with character. Really enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed wandering around trying to recruit extra workers for Snouter as well, although I did not do at all well at it. I think across all playthroughs I only managed to recruit a couple of people to the Guttery, which makes sense when you consider how disgusting the work is, but it's a bit weird given that the role is only on a 4+. I always appreciate a gamebook with a decent selection of oddball NPCs, and this does a sterling job of serving up various slightly strange characters for you to meet along the way. Let's talk systems. The first one I need to shout out is the Amanor system, which is the single thing that changed my mind about the opening in Salamonis. Amanor claims to be about reputation, but actually it's secretly an experience point system. When you complete the opening, you get to improve your starting ability scores by half of your current Amanor total. Given that you start with such low stats, this is a seriously big deal, and once I got eaten by that Gretch the first time, I realised that I was going to have to try and extract every last bit of Amanor from the opening portion of the gamebook if I wanted to survive. That added a sense of jeopardy which the opening had previously seemed to be lacking. It made it feel much less aimless. Amanor is also well judged in the way it's implemented. It's not really much of a morality system at all, for all its pretensions. You can lose the odd bit of Amanor for doing really mean or stupid things, but the main thing it tracks is simply the number of different scrapes you've managed to get yourself into and out of. It's a measure of the amount of adventure you've had, and the behaviour it shapes is trying to get into as many interesting situations as possible. That's exactly the kind of behaviour you want your book to incentivise. It's a mechanic that makes the player want to say yes to any harebrained scheme purely on the basis that it'll all be good life experience. That is awesome. It's also an inspired choice to call the experience system something else and do the reveal as a surprise at the end of the first act. Really enjoyed the sudden realisation that Amanor was 3 experience points in a trench coat trying to sneak into a film for reputation mechanics. Amanor also interacts well with some other systems. The decision to have the character start with minimum stats creates a real tension the first time you get to boost your stats. The temptation is to split your points between skill and luck and leave stamina to fend for itself. No matter how well you run the opening sections, there never seems to be quite enough points to go round. That's an illusion because of how Amanor interacts with another system, the skill system. The implementation of the skill system is really unusual. You'll only get a couple of skills to play with in each run, and usually skills are there to provide a little bit of flavour for a character. We saw this done very well in the Way of the Tiger books, where the skills help describe exactly what flavour of ninja your character was. And while some skills were more useful in different books, there was a general feeling that all the skills could be useful to you at different junctures. In Secrets of Salamonis, there are only 2 skills that matter. Everything else is a trap. Lucky and Spelling are the best skills, and it is not even close. Lucky, which is obtained by visiting the Temple of Logarn and chatting to a leprechaun, is extremely helpful, because it means you can pass literally any luck roll the book asks you to make. This makes your luck stat largely irrelevant, and means you can and should dump all of your Amanor into skill, so that you don't get eaten 3 times by a Gretch. Your stamina will generally take care of itself, and there's plenty of easy ways to heal along the way as well. Lucky is absurdly overpowered. Probably the most overpowered skill we've ever seen in fighting fantasy. Taking luck off the table as a mechanic seems insane on the face of it, but it does make sense here, given how stretched your resources are and how low your starting luck is. It turns luck from a functional stat to a problem to be solved, which is insanely inventive. The second skill that really matters is spelling. This magical skill acts as a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card, often providing an alternative means of dealing with a situation if you don't have the items or knowledge required. Well, I think Lucky is a very clever way of playing with the whole concept of game stats. I feel like spelling is a little bit more lazy. It's a handy way to turn down the difficulty, and that's appreciated, but it does make using spelling feel like you've failed in some way, and knowing that there's an easy way to circumvent certain problems with magic does make going to the effort of jumping through the various hoops feel a little pointless. That said, I think this gamebook would potentially be very challenging without spelling, and the ability to model through to the end is actually important in not making the gamebook feel utterly impenetrable, so on balance I think the inclusion was a good choice. Even if you get through with spelling, there's a certain pleasure to be found in not relying on the magic to get through. Once you know where everything is and the right sequence to do the quests, it's nice to have the option of doing a challenge run where you don't rely on either lucky or spelling to see you through, or you do the quests in a perversely difficult order. That could also be fun. The open nature of the core design makes Secrets of Salamonis particularly amenable to tinkering around to see what you can make work, and that is a lot of fun. It's cool to be able to take a couple of the useless skills and see whether you can manage to make it to the end. It's certainly possible without spelling, but I'm not sure whether you could do it without lucky, given that you really do need to sink as many points as possible into skill, and there are some mandatory luck tests along the way. It's possible you could get by maybe putting 1 point into luck, but I think that would significantly reduce your chances of being able to win some of the important fights. So maybe lucky is borderline required. One day I might sit down and try and see if I can do it without. Overall, I really enjoyed Secrets of Salamonis. It's got a perfect mixture of the familiar tropes of fighting fantasy and design decisions that are fairly novel for the series. The town of Salamonis feels like a great backdrop. It's deliberately less of a hive of scum and villainy than Port Blacksand or Carre, and manages to feel like it has its own identity as well, which is really good to see. The character and story work is generally strong, and the difficulty feels well judged, for all that some of that is down to hacking the systems quite hard to reduce the challenge. It is well written, and the art is some of my favourite illustrations we've seen for a while. It reminds me a lot of artists like Ian McCaig and Alan Langford from the early days, and there's a few nods to the great Ross Nicholson, who gets a shout out in the text with one of the NPCs being named after him. It's incredibly strong old school illustration work that could easily have graced the interior of any role-playing manual in the 1980s, but there's also just that hint of modern comic book art that helps it feel just contemporary enough. It's sterling work, it really is. Secrets of Salamonis isn't without its faults, but it's still a very good book and well worth grabbing a copy for your collection. It's not especially expensive either, which is always nice to see. Jackson and Green make an excellent writing partnership, and I'd love to see them collaborate again on a project. That is all for this episode. I hope you'll join me in a couple of weeks when I'll hopefully be playing Mark Smith's The Coils of Hate, which is a listener suggestion. I've been trying to get to it for ages. In the meantime, you can get in touch with me by email at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, at gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky at hjdoom. This has been a production of Doom Industries. Thank you very much for listening, take care, and I'll see you soon.